Chapter 1. The First Date. It was raining lightly that autumn afternoon, and the city of Gijon seemed to have been gripped by a deep melancholy. Ethan was walking slowly on the wet sidewalks, his thoughts lost in a poem he had recently read. His black umbrella, though solid, it was more a window between him and the leaden sky than a protection against the rain. The drops trickled down the edge of the umbrella, forming small waterfalls that accompanied the subtle music of the humid city. Ethan was an introverted young man with a deep passion for literature and art. He was 28 years old, but his soul seemed much older, marked by a sensitivity that was rarely understood by others. The city where he lived offered him the perfect refuge for his contemplative nature. Cobbled streets, intimate coffee shops, and obscure bookstores were where he felt truly alive that day. The rain, along with the diffuse light of the street lamps, guided him to one of those places of refuge, an old cafe, hidden in a quiet corner of the city. The cafe, called the Amber Window, was known only to those who discovered it by chance or through whispered recommendations.It was an oasis of calm amidst the urban tumult, with exposed brick walls and candles on every table. The atmosphere was intimate, almost magical, and the smell of the coffee shop mixed with the subtle aromas of vanilla and cinnamon was a balm to the senses. Ethan walked in, gently shaking his umbrella in the doorway. A warm breeze along with the sounds of a muted piano immediately greeted him as his gaze searched for a place free. His eyes fell on a woman sitting at a table in the corner of the cafe, framed by large windows facing the street. Although he still knew her name, Ethan felt that this woman radiated something special, a special energy that set her apart from everyone else. She was wearing a simple but elegant black dress, and her long, dark brown hair was loosely pinned to her back. The lines of her face, delicate and melancholy, were accentuated by intense blue eyes, which seemed to absorb the surrounding light and transform it into a mysterious depth. On the table, in a graceful position, was a book with old, worn covers. Lily was reading intently as she sipped from a steaming cup of tea. Her thick, delicate fingers caressed the pages with a gentleness that betrayed a respect deep for words. Ethan didn't know what to do. Come closer? To admire from a distance? He chose the latter option, sitting down at a nearby table where he could discreetly observe the apparition. Time seemed to stand still for Ethan as he watched her. Lily was lost in her reading, but every now and then, she looked up at the window where the rain was drawing trembling streaks. Her every gesture, every subtle movement, was like a poem in motion. Ethan felt a strong desire to know her, to find out who is that woman who seemed to carry the whole universe in her eyes. After a few minutes of contemplation, the waiter approached Ethan's table to take his order. "A long café, please," he said, his gaze inevitably returning to Lily. The waiter smiled slightly, noticing Ethan's subtle interest. That moment, Lily looked up from her book and noticed Ethan. For a split second, their eyes met, and time seemed to be suspended. There was something electric about that moment, something neither of them could explain. Lily smiled slightly, a gesture that mixed curiosity with politeness. Ethan, surprised, returned the smile, but he could feel his heart beating faster than it should have. Ethan tried to find the courage to initiate conversation. Lily turned her attention back to her book. Ethan took this as a sign that it wasn't the right time, but decided to stay in the cafe and hang out a little longer in that place that had suddenly become special to him. On the table, Lily had the book, The Trial by Franz Kafka. Ethan immediately recognized the title. Being one of his favorite novels, it was too beautiful a coincidence to be ignored. He wondered how he could use this detail to start a conversation, but the fear of seeming intrusive held him back. The time spent in the cafe became an almost transcendent experience for Ethan. There was something poetic about the way the rain beat rhythmically on the windows. Lily was lost in a world of her own, and he felt like a spectator of a story that had begun without his knowledge. When Lily got up to leave, Ethan felt as if he had lost something precious, recent, unspeakable. Chapter 2. The Unexpected Conversation. The next day, the rain continued, enveloping the city in a cold and mysterious fog. Ethan, still scarred by his fleeting encounter with Lily, could not focus on anything else. The image of her deep blue eyes and her delicate gestures came back to him, obsessively in his mind. The cafe, the Amber Window, had now become the place where his thoughts constantly gravitated. He didn't know why, but he felt that he had to return there. In the evening, driven by an inexplicable desire, Ethan returned to the cafe. The atmosphere was as welcoming as always. Vintage lamps cast warm light over the solid wood tables, and the smell of freshly roasted coffee filled the air. This time, the cafe was busier, but Ethan managed to find a free table near the one where he had seen Lily the day before. However, to his disappointment, she wasn't there. Ethan ordered a coffee long and immersed himself in a volume of poems, but he couldn't really read. His gaze periodically scanned the cafe, hoping to see her enter. The minutes were turning into hours, and his hope was beginning to fade when suddenly the door to the cafe opened and Lily appeared in the doorway. She was wearing the same elegant black dress, and her hair was as loosely tied as in the previous day. Although wet from the rain, Lily radiated a natural beauty, unaffected by the weather. Her gaze scanned the cafe until it settled on Ethan. For a moment, her discreet smile reappeared, and he felt a rush of adrenaline. Lily headed straight for his table. "Can I sit down?" she asked him in a soft but determined voice. Ethan was caught completely off guard, but he motioned to the empty seat, stumbling over his own words. "Of course. Please." Lily sat down slowly, gracefully, leaving the book she was carrying on the table. "It was all the trial by Franz Kafka." Ethan looked at the book and, unable to help himself, said, "Kafka one more time?" "Yes," she answered with a subtle smile. "In this book, every reading brings something new. You never know what to expect. Just like in life." Ethan smiled. "It's one of my favorites, but I have to admit, it seems a bit gloomy." "Sometimes in the shadows you find the most beautiful truths," said Lily, and the depth of her words left Ethan speechless for a few moments. Their conversation began to flow naturally. From Kafka, they moved to other authors, then to art, music and life. Ethan discovered that Lily had a sparkling intelligence and a rare sensitivity. She talked about her passion for the piano and how music had once been the center of her universe. Still, she spoke with a certain reserve, as if she was hiding a deep pain. Ethan didn't insist, but he couldn't help but notice that shadow behind her smile. What hobbies do you have?" Lily asked, breaking him out of his thoughts. Ethan hesitated for a moment. "Literature is my first love. I write sometimes, but more for myself. It is my way of understanding the world." "Do you have anything written with you now?" Lily asked curiously. Ethan smiled shyly. "Maybe, but I'm not sure it's good enough to show anyone," Lily interrupted with a soft smile. "Art is about vulnerability. When you share it, it becomes something bigger than you." Her words touched Ethan deeply. He felt compelled to show her a fragment of a poem he had in his notebook. Lily read it carefully, and when he finished, he looked directly into his eyes. "Ethan, your words are beautiful. They have a rare sensitivity. Keep writing." That simple but sincere appreciation warmed Ethan's heart. It was clear that Lily was not only an enigmatic woman, but also someone who had the gift of seeing the beauty in the small things. As the evening wore on, the cafe gradually emptied, but Ethan and Lily remained at their table, lost in conversation. Every word spoken built a bridge between two strangers who were starting to become something more. Ethan felt that Lily meant something unique, something he had never experienced before. Lily, on the other hand, seemed to enjoy it. Chapter 3. The First Crack. Time passed, and the relationship between Ethan and Lily deepened. After each meeting in their favorite cafe, Ethan felt that he was discovering another layer of her mysterious personality. However, Lily always seemed to keep a part of her in the shadows, protected from prying eyes. Ethan, though fascinated, was beginning to wonder if he would ever get to know her fully. One chilly morning, Ethan woke up earlier than usual. The sky was covered with heavy clouds, and the air had a fresh smell of rain. Pushed by an unexpected impulse, he decided to write Lily a message. He proposed to meet in a park on the outskirts of the city, a secluded place that he had discovered years ago, perfect for an intimate conversation. To his surprise, Lily responded almost immediately, accepting the invitation. When they met, Lily was dressed in a long woolen coat and wore a white scarf that put her highlight. The blue eyes. Ethan, excited, led her down an alley lined with bare trees, whose branches seemed to reach out to the sky like pleading hands. The park was deserted, and the only sound that could be heard was that of their footsteps on the carpet of wet leaves. Lily seemed quieter than usual. Ethan noticed that she was wrapping her hands around the scarf as if trying to find a foothold. He broke the silence. "Are you feeling well? You look preoccupied." Lily smiled weakly, but didn't answer immediately. Her gaze wandered through the trees, as if searching for answers in a place invisible to others. Finally, she said, "I'm fine, Ethan. It's just that sometimes in quiet places like this, I feel vulnerable. It's like the silence forces me to face things I try to ignore." Ethan was surprised by the honesty. It wasn't the kind of answer he was expecting, but he could feel Lily starting to give him a glimpse into the depths of her soul. "Maybe vulnerability isn't a bad thing," he said. "Sometimes, it's when we face our own fears that we discover the most beautiful parts of ourselves." Lily looked him straight in the eye, and Ethan felt a deep connection for the first time, as if all the walls she had built were starting to crumble. But that moment of closeness was short-lived. Lily suddenly changed the subject. asking him about his plans for future. Ethan sensed that something had changed. The conversation continued, but it was clear that Lily had lost interest in discussing her own feelings. Instead, she seemed to direct everything at Ethan, as if trying to mask her own vulnerability. Although he patiently answered all her questions, a subtle uneasiness was beginning to creep into his heart. At the end of the meeting, Lily thanked him for the day they had spent together and she shook his hand. Her gesture was full of affection but distant at the same time, leaving Ethan to wonder if there were barriers between them that he couldn't cross. A few days later, Ethan decided to make a gesture that to prove how much Lily meant to him. Inspired by their conversations about art and literature, he created a series of illustrated letters, each containing a piece of poetry he had written, accompanied by drawings simple but expressive. His plan was to give her the letters one at a time, on each date, hoping that this way he could show her how much he appreciated her. When he handed her the first letter, Lily was visibly moved. She opened the envelope carefully, and when he read the lines written by Ethan, a sincere smile lit up his face. "Ethan, that's wonderful. No one has ever done anything so nice for me." Her words filled him with joy, but at the same time piqued his curiosity. Why did Lily seem so amazed by a gesture that for him seemed natural? Had she been so unaffectionate in the past? However, his enthusiasm was tempered by an unexpected revelation. As Lily thanked him, Ethan noticed a subtle, almost imperceptible gesture. She clutched the letter with a strange intensity, as if it were a precious talisman, but her gaze she went dark for a split second. Although the moment was brief, Ethan couldn't ignore it. This contradiction between her honest reaction and the shadow that seemed haunting her became a point of obsession for Ethan. He was beginning to realize that no matter how much he tried to get close to her, Lily was keeping a secret, and while he didn't want to force her to talk, he felt that that secret might change everything between them. Late one evening, as Ethan was working on the next letter for Lily, he received a message from her. It was short and unexpected. "Can we talk? There's something I have to tell you." Her words had a profound effect on Ethan. Although he didn't know what to expect, he was filled with a sense of anticipation mixed with fear. Who was hiding it? Or was it something much simpler, but just as important? When they met, Lily was visibly agitated. Although she tried to keep her composure, her hands were shaking slightly, and her voice was more fragile than usual. Ethan waited patiently, letting her find her words. "Ethan," she began with difficulty, "I want you to know that I appreciate everything you do for me, but I have to be honest with you. I'm not who you think I am." These words fell like a thunderbolt. Ethan felt as the world around him begins to fall apart. But at the same time, he felt a strong desire to understand, to give Lily a chance to explain herself. "It doesn't matter what you have to say," he replied in a soft voice. "I'm here, Lily. I promise I'll listen to you." With teary eyes, Lily began to tell him about her past. Every word was loaded with pain and regret, and Ethan could feel every piece of the puzzle falling into place. But the truth would put their relationship to the test, and Ethan could not foresee how they would manage to overcome this first crack in their story. Chapter 4. The Fragility of a Connection. Lily's revelation left deep scars on Ethan's mind and heart. Although he had tried to maintain a semblance of calm and understanding in the face of her confession, the truth was that he had not been able to fully process what he had heard. The stories Lily had shared with him, about her mistakes, the rash decisions and consequences that shaped her life, had made him understand some of the complexity of her soul. But that understanding, it came with a price. A deep restlessness that kept him awake at night. In the weeks that followed, Ethan began spending more time at the coffee shop where they had first met. Now the place seemed to offer him a refuge to reflect on. As he sipped his bitter coffee and watched the people rushing down the street, he tried to understand what it all meant to him. The question that gnawed at him the most was whether he could accept Lily's past and build a relationship based on trust, or if that initial rift was a sign that their bond was, in fact, fragile. On the other hand, Lily felt the weight of her own confessions. She was aware that although Ethan hadn't said anything to indicate disappointment, there had been a subtle distance between them. Instead of continuing their regular series of dates, Lily preferred to stay away for a few days, allowing time to calm the troubled waters of their relationship. Late one evening, Ethan received an unexpected message from her. "I'm thinking of leaving town for a while. I don't know if it's the right thing to do, but I feel like I have to find answers." These words had a devastating effect on Ethan. The idea of losing connection with Lily, even temporarily, was unthinkable. Yet he knew that for her, that distance might be necessary. The next morning, Ethan went to Lily's apartment. He didn't have a concrete plan, but he knew he had to see her. When she opened the door, he was wearing a robe simple, and her expression betrayed fatigue and accumulated tension. Ethan walked in, and for a few moments they were both silent. Then he spoke first. "Lily, I understand that you need time, and maybe you're right, maybe a break will bring you clarity. But I want you to know that you don't have to go through this alone. I'm here for you, regardless of your decisions." Lily watched with tearful eyes, and her voice was almost a whisper when she answered him. "I don't want to hurt you, Ethan, but there are things I have to deal with on my own. If I don't do it now, I'll feel trapped in my past forever." Ethan understood. However, breaking up with Lily, even temporary, it seemed to him an act of renunciation. Instead of insisting, he gave her a sad smile and said, "Then just promise me that you'll come back, and that no matter what answers you find, you'll tell me the truth." Lily nodded in agreement, and Ethan left her apartment with a heavy heart. That night, he couldn't sleep. His thoughts carried him between the memories of their happy times and the uncertainty of the future. A few days later, Lily left town. Ethan received a short message from her, letting him know she had arrived safely and that she would keep in touch. But as the days turned into weeks, her messages became less and less frequent. Ethan tried to occupy his spare time by writing, but all he produced seemed to reflect the longing and confusion he felt. One morning, while going through their old messages, Ethan found a clue he had overlooked, a name of town Lily mentioned in an earlier conversation. It was a place she had said she would like to go one day, a small town known for its mountain scenery and peaceful atmosphere. Pushed by an impulse, Ethan decided he was going there. He didn't know if he would find Lily, but he felt he had to try. The trip was long, and Ethan had plenty of time to analyze his own feelings. He really wanted to find her on Lily, or was he trying to fill a void in his life? The question remained unanswered. When he arrived in the city, he was greeted by a deep silence. The streets were almost deserted, and the cold air reminded him of the evenings spent with Lily in their favorite coffee shop. After a few hours of discreet searching, Ethan found her Lily in a small bookstore, bent over an old book. Looking at her from the doorway, she felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. The question, "What's next?" hovered in the air, and the answer seemed to be hidden in Lily's eyes. When she saw him, Lily was not surprised to see him. Perhaps a part of her had expected Ethan to make this gesture. She invited him to a small table in the corner of the bookstore, and the conversation that followed was one of the most difficult in their relationship. Lily told him about her discoveries during the trip, about how she had begun to accept mistakes about the past, and how he had learned to forgive himself. But most of all, she told Ethan that, for the first time in years, she felt ready to put the past behind her. "I realized that running away wasn't the answer," Lily said. "But sometimes getting away from everything you know helps you see things more clearly. And what I see now is that you were the only one who really understood me." Ethan, he felt a wave of hope in her words. But he knew they had a lot to discuss before they could continue together. However, Lily's presence there beside him gave him the courage to believe that the fragility of their connection could be transformed into something stronger. In that modest bookstore, Ethan and Lily took the first step toward rebuilding their relationship, but the road was not without obstacles, and the shadows of the past still lurked nearby, ready to test again the strength of their bond. Chapter 5. Walls that Separate Hearts. After their reunion in the small bookstore in the mountain town, Ethan and Lily seemed to find a thread of hope that would lead them to rebuild their relationship. But as promising as this reunion was, the shadows of the past continued to insinuate themselves between them, like invisible walls that kept them apart. This chapter explores the depth of that inner struggle, for both Ethan and Lily, and reveals how difficult it is to bridge the gap between two souls marked by suffering and doubt. Lily was determined to get her life in order, and Ethan had become an anchor in the process. But even though their conversations seemed full of understanding and compassion, there was a discrepancy between what they were saying and what they were really feeling. Ethan felt Lily withdraw whenever they touched on topics related to the future. On the other hand, Lily perceived Ethan's need for stability as a subtle pressure, a force pushing her toward a decision she didn't feel ready to make. One chilly fall morning, the two decided to take a walk through the forest near the town. The fresh air and the rustle of fallen leaves seemed to create the ideal setting for open conversation. However, as they walked in silence side by side, the unspoken tension became more and more evident. "Do you remember when you were telling me about your dream of writing a novel?" Lily asked, trying to break the silence. Ethan smiled slightly, but the tone of his voice betrayed some melancholy. "Yes, but somehow that dream was eclipsed by other things. Maybe I lost my inspiration," he answered. "Or maybe you're afraid to finish it," Lily said, giving him a direct look. This observation caught Ethan by surprise. He hadn't expected Lily to touch such a sensitive chord. And yet, she was right. The fear of failure had always prevented him from finishing what he had started. Looking at her, Ethan realized that the same fear seemed to prevent Lily from fully opening up to him. "You're right," he said after a pause. "And maybe the two of us are more alike than we thought." "And you're afraid to finish your own novel?" Lily was silent for a few moments, considering his words. She felt that Ethan had a subtle analogy to their relationship, but she wasn't sure how to respond. Instead of continuing the conversation, she changed the subject, talking about the beauty of the forest in the fall colors. Ethan agreed, this chain. But in his heart he knew that the problem remained unresolved. As the weeks passed, their relationship seemed to oscillate between moments of intense closeness and periods of emotional distance. One evening, Ethan decided to invite Lily to a dinner in an elegant restaurant in the city. It was a gesture he was trying to show her that despite the uncertainties, he was willing to make an effort to build something beautiful between them. The restaurant had an atmosphere intimate, with candles on each table and piano music playing in the background. Lily seemed impressed by his choice, and for a while their conversation was relaxed. They discussed books they'd recently read, places they'd like to visit, and they even laughed about childhood memory. But as dinner drew to a close, Ethan felt the need to broach the subjects they had been avoiding until then. "Lily, I need to know what you really want," he said, looking her straight in the eyes. "Not just for me, but for you too." Lily felt a lump form in her throat. She knew that this moment he would come, but she wasn't ready for him. "Ethan, I want to be happy, but I don't know what that means for me yet. All I know is that I need time and space to figure that out," she answered with a shaky voice. Ethan nodded, trying to mask his disappointment. He understood her need to find herself, but he could not ignore the fact that this uncertainty affected him deeply. "And what happens to us?" he asked in a softer tone. "Are we part of that happiness you seek?" Lily avoided his gaze, focusing on her glass of wine. "Ethan, I don't have a clear answer right now, but I want to believe we are," she finally said. Her answer, while honest, didn't fully satisfy Ethan. He could feel his patience being tested, and his insecurity. It left Lily with a sense of vulnerability that he had never experienced before. In the days that followed, Ethan began to devote more time to his own literary project. Inspired by the conversations with Lily, but also by his own turmoil, he began to write a story about two people who, although deeply connected, struggled to find a balance between their past and future. Writing had become a form of therapy for him, but also a way to express the emotions she was unable to communicate directly. Meanwhile, Lily continued to explore the mountain town and its surroundings. She walked through the narrow streets, visiting art galleries, and spent hours in small cafes, reading or writing in her diary. It was a process of rediscover, but also an attempt to understand what the future she wanted looked like. One day, while walking through a quiet park, Lily met an old man playing the piano in an open pavilion. His melody of melancholic beauty awakened in her memories of the time when music was the center of life. Approaching, he began to speak with the old man, who told him that he came there daily to share music with anyone who would listen. This meeting had a profound effect on Lily. It reminded her that despite losses and mistakes from the past, art had the power to heal and reconnect people. That evening, she sent Ethan a short message. "Tomorrow I want to talk." When they met the next day, in their favorite cafe, Lily seemed different. She was calmer, more determined. "Ethan, I want to thank you for being patient with me," she began. "I know it wasn't easy, but this distance gave me the clarity I needed." Ethan listened intently, his heart pounding. "And what did you discover?" he asked with a trembling voice. Lily smiled slightly. "I discovered that I can't run away from my past, but I don't have to let it define me either, and more importantly, I discovered that, throughout this journey, you were the only constant. You were my anchor." For the first after a long time, Ethan felt a deep sense of relief. He knew that although their road was still long, this moment was a turning point. The walls that separated them had begun to crack, making way for light. Chapter 6. Between Light and Shadows. After their conversation in the familiar cafe, Ethan and Lily seemed to have taken an important step in their journey together. However, the real challenge was just beginning. In this chapter, the lights of hope intertwine with the shadows of the past, and the two must face not only the world around, but also your own fears and insecurities. This is the story of a moment of fragile balance, in which hard decisions and personal revelations are inevitable. The morning was quiet, with a pale blue sky sprinkled with fluffy clouds. Ethan and Lily had decided to spend the day exploring a picturesque village located on the edge of the mountain town. It was a destination Lily had read about in a travel magazine, and the idea of a getaway in a secluded place attracted them both. The winding road to the village was surrounded by dense forest, and the fresh air filled their lungs with each breath. As the car moved forward, Ethan tried to collect his thoughts. "What do you think we will find there?" he asked, glancing at Lily, who was staring absently out the window. "Maybe something to bring us peace," she answered without looking away. "Or maybe just another part of us that we haven't discovered yet." Ethan smiled at her enigmatic answer. He wanted to believe that this trip would help them build stronger bridges between them, but he knew that sometimes the silence between them spoke louder than words. When they reached the village, the place seemed detached from another time. The small houses, built of stone and wood, were framed by gardens full of wild flowers. A modest central market with a few artisan stalls housed locals selling their wares with warm smiles and friendly conversation. Walked along the narrow alleys, stopping now and then to admire the architectural details or buy small souvenirs. As they approached an old stone church, the old man beckoned them in. Inside, light streamed through stained glass, creating vibrant patterns on the stone floor. Ethan felt a wave of calm wash over him, while Lily seemed lost in contemplation. "Sometimes old places like this seem to preserve the emotions of those who passed by," she said slowly, almost as if to herself. "What emotions do you feel now?" Ethan asked, hoping to read some of her thoughts. "A combination of sadness and hope," Lily answered, turning to him. "Sadness for all that can't be changed, but also hope for what might come." Ethan felt that this was one of the few moments where Lily was really opening up. He wanted to encourage her, but he knew any inappropriate words could make her withdraw again. As the day progressed, the two found a place secluded, on a hill that offered a panoramic view of the village. They spread a blanket and sat in silence, letting themselves be enveloped by the sounds of nature. Ethan worked up the courage to address deeper topics. "Lily, do you think people can really leave the past behind?" he asked. Lily took a long look at the horizon before answering. "I don't think we can leave it behind completely, but I think we can learn to live with it, accept it as a part of us, and use it as a lesson." Ethan nodded, acknowledging the truth in her words. "And do you think that we can build a future together, despite all the things that have marked us?" he continued. Lily turned to him, a combination of vulnerability and determination in her gaze. "I don't know, Ethan, but what I do know is that I want to try, and I think this is a start." For Ethan, these words were both a comfort and a challenge. He knew that their road would not be easy, but the fact that Lily was willing to make an effort motivated him to fight for their relationship. In the evening, on the way back, the rain began to fall lightly, turning the landscape into a melancholy picture. In the car, Ethan and Lily listened to music in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. The rain seemed to reflect their emotional state, a mixture of cleansing and renewal, but also melancholy. When they got back to the cabin, Lily suggested that Ethan light a fire in the fireplace, while the flames danced, creating shadows on the walls. The two sat on the couch, a thick blanket covering them. Tea was a moment of quiet intimacy, where words were unnecessary. At one point, Lily broke the silence. "Ethan, I want to tell you something," she began, her voice shaking. "I realize that sometimes the biggest barrier between me and happiness is myself. I'm afraid to let people get close, because I don't want to hurt them or be hurt." Ethan looked at her with understanding and gentleness. "Lily, we all have fears, but what matters is that we don't let them control us. I'm afraid too, but I'm willing to risk it, if it means building something together." His words had a deep impact on Lily. In that moment, she realized that Ethan was not only a partner, but also a support she could rely on. Slowly but surely, the walls she had built around her heart were beginning to crumble. Chapter ended with the two of them sitting together, looking into each other's eyes and feeling that, for the first time, they were on the same wavelength. Although their path was still strewn with uncertainties, this moment of deep connection was a light in the darkness that had surrounded them for so long. This chapter is a celebration of vulnerability and the courage to love despite fear. It's a milestone in Ethan and Lily's story, marking the beginning of a new chapter in their life, one where hope and determination begin to dominate in the face of doubt and regret. Chapter 7. The Invisible Walls. As the days turned into weeks, Ethan and Lily's relationship continued to evolve. Despite their moments of closeness and deep understanding, a subtle tension still hovered between them. It was as if they each kept an invisible wall built of insecurities and past experiences. This chapter explores this fragile balance between love and distance, between the desire to get closer and the fear of exposing oneself completely. It was a sunny autumn morning, and the cool air it brought with it the promise of a day full of possibilities. Ethan and Lily had decided to visit a newly opened art gallery that they had heard exhibited exciting contemporary works. For Ethan, art was an opportunity to understand the world from a different perspective, and for Lily it was a refuge, a place where she could contemplate beauty despite the chaos inside her. On the way, Ethan tried to strike up a conversation about their plans for the future. "Have you ever thought about where you would like to be in 5 years?" he asked, trying to keep his tone casual. Lily smiled slightly, but her gaze betrayed some melancholy. Not really. I've spent so much time focusing on the present that the future seems like an abstract concept, she replied. What about you? Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Ethan hesitated for a moment, trying to form his thoughts. I hope somewhere where I can feel reconciled, somewhere where I know that we have built something genuine, maybe with you, if you want that too. Lily looked at him, surprised by his sincerity. She could feel his desire to build a future together. But her own fears still held her back. The gallery was located in a converted industrial building, with high ceilings and white walls that highlighted the artwork. Ethan and Lily walked by from one exhibition to another, discussing what they were seeing. One work in particular caught their eye, an abstract painting that seemed to depict two figures separated by a transparent wall. The vibrant colors and curved shapes suggested a connection between them, but the wall suggested an impassable barrier. It seems to be about us, Ethan said, with a sad smile. Lily looked at the painting for a long moment before answering. Maybe it is, or maybe it's about any relationship where people keep their secrets and fears to themselves. Ethan felt this was an important moment, an opportunity to address the invisible walls between them. Lily, I want to really know you, not just the parts you show to the world, but also the parts you hide. I want to know what makes you you. Lily took a deep breath, trying to gather her courage. She knew Ethan deserved her honesty, but the fear of being vulnerable still overwhelmed her. It's not easy for me, Ethan, she finally said. There are things from my past that haunt me, things I'm not ready to share yet. Ethan nodded in understanding. I know, and I don't want to force you, but I want you to know that I'm here, that I'm not scared of what you're hiding. We all have our shadows. After the visit to the gallery, the two went to a small cafe nearby. They enjoyed their teas. Ethan noticed that Lily seemed quieter, but also more thoughtful than usual. Ethan, do you think people can really change? She asked, looking him straight in the eye. I think so, but change doesn't come easily. It takes time, courage and support. And I think the most important thing is to want to change for yourself, not for someone else. Lily smiled weakly, recognizing the truth in the words his. I wish I had your courage, she said softly. I wish I could leave behind all the mistakes I've made and start over. Ethan took her hand in his, giving it an anchor of stability. Lily, you don't have to do this alone. I'm here, and no matter how hard it gets, I'll be by your side every step of the way. This simple yet profound statement had a powerful impact on Lily. For the first time, she felt that she no longer had to carry the burden of her past alone. Although the invisible walls between them had not completely disappeared, they had begun to crack, letting the light in the evening. After they returned home, Ethan proposed that they cook together. The small kitchen of their apartment became a makeshift playground, where laughter and their teasing filled the space. Lily chopped vegetables. Ethan tried to make her smile by telling funny stories from her childhood. And then of course I fell into the river, he said, laughing. I think that was the first time my mother wanted to leave me there. Lily laughed, and for a moment, the burden she was carrying seemed to disappear. Ethan, you are like a ray of sunshine on a gloomy day, she said spontaneously. I don't know what I would do without you. Ethan felt that these words came from the heart, and they filled him with unexpected warmth. And you are more than you think, Lily. You are strong, even if you don't realize it. That evening was a moment of reconnection, where laughter and moments of tenderness created precious memory. Although they knew that their journey together would be fraught with obstacles, they were both determined to go through it together. The evening ends with a sense of cautious hope, although the invisible walls between Ethan and Lily were not completely torn down. The cracks that had appeared begin to allow a deeper connection. It is a moment of transition, in which the two begin to face their fears and build a solid foundation for the future. Through this passage, the story emphasizes the importance of vulnerability and mutual support in the face of emotional difficulties. Chapter 8. Fractures in Time. Morning seemed to have a special charm lately. Sunlight filtered through the heavy curtains of the apartment, creating a playful dance of shadows on the walls. Ethan prepared coffee, a routine that had become almost ritualistic for him. His thoughts were divided, between present and future. His relationship with Lily, though full of moments of intimacy and tenderness, seemed to be suspended in a fragile balance. There were times when Lily seemed fully present, open and vulnerable, but at other times, she retreated to a corner of her mind, inaccessible even to Ethan. That morning, Lily had sat at the table, absent-minded, and a cup of tea steaming in front of her. Ethan, he noticed this and decided not to break the silence. He knew Lily needed space to process her own thoughts. However, curiosity and concern pushed him to. She asked what was troubling her. Finally, she broke the silence. Are you feeling well? he asked, trying to hide his uneasiness. Lily flinched slightly, as if she had been awakened from a dream. She looked at him and smiled, but her smile did not reach her eyes. "Yeah, I just had a weird dream last night, nothing major," she said, avoiding going into detail. Ethan sensed that wasn't the whole story, but chose not to press it. He knew from experience that Lily needed time to open his soul. Instead, he changed the subject, telling her about a book he had recently read, one that looked at the complexities of human relationships through the lens of art. Lily listened, but her mind seemed to be elsewhere. Later that day, the two decided to take a walk through a nearby park. Fall was making its presence felt in glorious fashion, with coppery leaves falling from the trees and fresh air invigorating them. Ethan hoped this outing would help Lily relax. As they walked the leaf-covered path, he began to tell about his dreams about the future: a small house on the outskirts of the city, a garden full of flowers, and a simple but meaningful life. Lily listened to him, but her face betrayed tension in her. When Ethan mentioned the possibility of having children one day, Lily stopped abruptly. Her gaze, usually calm and contemplative, was now intense and troubled. "Ethan, I don't know if I can share the same vision of the future with you," she said softly. "There are things in my past that prevent me from imagining such a future." Ethan felt a knot in his stomach. He realized that this was one of those defining moments. He remembered all those times when Lily seemed to withdraw into herself, and now he was beginning to understand why. "Lily, whatever it is, I want to know. I want to understand what's holding you back," he said gently. Lily sighed deeply and looked up at the sky, as if looking for answers among the branches of the trees. "It's not that simple, Ethan. Some things are harder said than done." Ethan nodded, respecting her silence. He knew pressure wasn't the answer. Instead, he reached out and took hers, offering wordless support. In the evening, after they returned home, the atmosphere between them was charged with a subtle tension. Ethan proposed to cook together, hoping to banish the heavy clouds that seemed to hang over them. Surround us. Lily chopped vegetables, and Ethan took care of the sauce. Their conversation became lighter. They laughed at Ethan's awkwardness in the kitchen, and a funny memory from Lily's childhood when she tried to bake a cake but ended up by setting the oven on fire. When dinner was ready, they sat down at the table, and Ethan raised a spontaneous toast. For the simple but precious moments, and for the courage to move forward regardless of what's hiding in the past, he said. Looking into her blue eyes that reflected the candlelight, Lily smiled. And this smile seemed to be more sincere than the one in the morning. He lifted the glass and clinked it with his own. "And for the patience to discover the beauty in imperfections," she added. That night, Ethan woke up late to find Lily sitting in the living room, lost in thought. She was holding an old photograph, which she was looking at, an expression of deep melancholy. Ethan sat down next to her without saying anything. "That's my mom," Lily said, pointing to the photo. "She was an incredible woman, but I let her down in so many ways." Ethan listened intently as Lily began to open up. She talked about a relationship from past, one that had consumed and transformed her. She told of the mistakes she had made and the regrets that haunted her. Tears streamed down her cheeks as she spoke, but her voice was firm, as if this act of confession was a release. Ethan felt a mixture of emotion, pain for her suffering, but also admiration for her courage to share her story. "Lily, we all have a past, but what matters is how we choose to move forward, and I'm here to help you, no matter what," he said. Taking her hand in his, Lily looked at him, and deep gratitude could be read in her eyes. For the first time, she felt she was no longer alone in her battle with her inner demons. Ethan and Lily began to build a bridge across the chasm created by her fears and her regret. Although their path is still full of obstacles, moments of genuine connection between them suggest that their love has the potential to heal them both. Chapter 9. The Rise of the Rival. The days seemed calmer for Ethan and Lily after last night's confessions. However, the calm would be only an illusion, because a presence would appear in their lives that would shake the fragile balance of their relationship from the foundations. On a chilly evening fall, while the two of them were having dinner at an elegant restaurant, a shadow from Lily's past took an unexpected step into the present. The atmosphere was one pleasant, the warm lights of the restaurant reflecting off the wine glasses. Ethan looked at Lily, who seemed more relaxed than she had been in days, but this moment of calm was interrupted by a firm yet elegant voice that echoed almost of their table. "Lily, I can't believe it's you," said a tall man dressed impeccably in a gray suit. His voice had a mixture of surprise and authority, and his gaze was fixed on Lily. Lily flinched and her expression changed instantly. Her eyes held a combination of surprise, tension, and a vague sense of fear. Ethan felt the change immediately, though he still didn't understand what had caused it. "Alexander, I didn't expect to see you here," Lily said, her voice betraying an insecurity Ethan had never seen before. Alexander, Lily's ex-boyfriend, was a man who exuded strength and confidence. His voice seemed to fill the entire room, and his calm smile had a subtle dose of arrogance. As he approached their table, Ethan felt a wave of uneasiness. The man had an air of superiority, and the look he gave Ethan was almost a silent warning. "And this must be your new friend?" Alexander asked, turning to Ethan and holding out his hand. "My name is Alexander, but Lily probably already told you about me." Ethan shook her hand, trying to keep his composure. "Ethan, and no, Lily didn't tell me anything about you," he answered, looking him straight in the eyes. Lily looked uncomfortable, avoiding eye contact with both men. The situation was tense, and Ethan felt that Alexander's presence it was no accident. Everything seemed too well calculated, from the timing of his appearance to the way he positioned himself towards them. After a short and somewhat superficial conversation, Alexander asked his apologized and left, but not before looking intensely at Lily and saying, "I hope we have a chance to talk more soon." After his departure, Ethan couldn't hide his curiosity and concern. "Who is he, Lily? And what does it mean to you?" he asked, trying to control his tone. Lily sighed and ran a hand through her hair, a gesture that Ethan recognized as one of nervousness. "Alexander was an important part of my past. We were together for a long time. He was a man who gave me a lot, but also one who hurt me deeply," she said, avoiding going into details. Ethan wanted to ask more, but felt that this was not the time. Instead, he tried to offer her support. "If you ever feel like you need to tell me more, I'm here," he said, trying to hide his own insecurity. In the days that followed, Alexander continued to appear in their lives, each time with an almost exasperating elegance, whether it was random meetings around town or text messages to Lily. His presence was constant and hard to ignore. Ethan could feel this intrusion starting to affect their relationship. Lily was becoming increasingly withdrawn, and their once open conversations now became evasive. One evening, Ethan found Lily reading a message on her phone, with an expression he couldn't decipher. When he asked her about it, she hesitated before answering. "It's from Alexander. He wants to meet to discuss something important," she said, avoiding Ethan's gaze. "And what do you want?" Ethan asked, trying to keep his cool. "I don't know. I feel like maybe I should listen to him, close this chapter of my life," Lily answered, with an honesty that seemed to hurt Ethan more than anything else. When Lily agreed to meet with Alexander, Ethan felt a mixture of anger and fear. He knew he couldn't control her decision, but the fear of losing her was crushing him. As Lily left for the date, Ethan was left alone with his thoughts. The meeting between Lily and Alexander took place in an exclusive restaurant. Alexander was, as always, flawless and charming. He talked about his success, about the regrets he had about their past, and about the desire to have her again in his life. Lily, though impressed by his eloquence, felt an emotional wall between them. Although a part of her had once been drawn to his charisma and wealth, she now clearly saw the difference between Alexander's superficial world and the authenticity he had found in his relationship with Ethan. "Lily, you deserve more than a mundane life. I can give you anything you want," Alexander said. Taking her hand in his, Lily withdrew her hand, and her gaze darkened. "It's not about what you can give me, Alexander. It's about what I feel and what I want to build. And that has nothing to do with you anymore," she answered with unexpected firmness. When she returned home, Ethan waited with bated breath to find out what happened. Lily told him everything, and her honesty reassured him. However, Alexander's presence had left a mark. Ethan knew that he must fight to keep their connection strong, especially now that the rivalry between him and Alexander has become apparent. The discussion ends on a tense note, but also with the hope that Ethan and Lily will find the strength to strengthen their relationship despite the obstacles that Lily's past and Alexander's intrusion have brought into their lives. Chapter 10. Betrayal. The tension between Ethan and Lily had grown, and the shadows of the past continued to creep into their present. Alexander, with his commanding presence and calculated charm, had become a destabilizing element. Although Lily seemed to remain steadfast in the face of Alexander's proposals, Ethan could not ignore the fact that there were still unresolved ties between them. On a cold November evening, Ethan and Lily had their first real fight. It all started with a seemingly mundane discussion about the future, but quickly turned into a heated debate about trust and each other's intentions. "Lily, I can't understand why you're still talking to him. Alexander just wants to bring you back into his world," Ethan said, his voice betraying growing frustration. "Ethan, you don't understand. It's not that simple. We have a past together. I respect him, but that doesn't mean I want him in my life," Lily replied defensively. Ethan looked at her with dumb pain, hard to believe her word, especially when he had seen her hesitate so often in Alexander's presence. "And what does this mean for us?" Will there always be a part of you that I can't touch? He asked, almost whispering. Lily was silent. Her answer came in the form of a heavy sigh, a sign that their fight was far from over. In the days that followed, Ethan felt the distance between them grow larger and larger. Lily seemed more absent, lost in thoughts, and her answers to his questions were increasingly evasive. Ethan tried to remain patient, but the fear of losing her was becoming overwhelming. It all came to a head in an evening when Ethan found a note on the dining room table. It was written in Lily's characteristic haste and contained only a few words. We need to talk. I'll be back late. Ethan felt an emptiness in his stomach. It was obvious to him where Lily was and with whom. Lily had met Alexander at an exclusive hotel downtown. It had been a deliberate choice on Alexander's part, who knew how to create an atmosphere of intimacy and nostalgia. Lily felt trapped in a game she didn't know how to control. Although she was aware of the strong feelings she had them for Ethan, Alexander's presence caused him painful confusion. You know, I never stopped thinking about you, Alexander said, looking her straight in the eyes. Alexander, things are not the same anymore. I am not the same person anymore, answered Lily, but her voice was uncertain. And yet you're here, he said, smiling. You're not here just because you want to close a chapter. You're here because a part of you still remembers what we had together. Lily felt a mixture of guilt and desire. Alexander was right in a way, and it troubled her deeply. That night, the lines between past and present blurred. Ethan wasn't there to pull her back, and Alexander knew exactly how to do it to feel wanted and important. Ethan waited for Lily late into the night. When she returned, her face was a mask of confusion and regret. Ethan immediately saw that something was wrong. Where have you been, Lily? He asked, trying to keep his cool. Ethan. We need to talk, she said, avoiding his gaze. Ethan felt a lump forming in his throat. Just tell me the truth, you were with him, weren't you? He asked, his voice shaking. Lily nodded, unable to lie. Yes, but it's not what you think. I needed you to finish something that had remained unresolved. And what did you finish, Lily? Ethan asked, the pain in his voice obvious. Are you over the past, or our relationship? Lily didn't answer right away. Her silence was enough for Ethan to understand. For the first time, he felt like he couldn't trust her anymore. In the days that followed, Ethan was devastated. He had withdrawn into himself, trying to, and figure out how to handle betrayal. To him, loyalty had always been the foundation of their relationship, and the fact that Lily had chosen to spend time with Alexander was too much of a blow. Lily, on the other hand, she felt caught between guilt and wanting to make amends. She knew what she had done was wrong, but she wasn't sure how to win back Ethan's trust. In a desperate attempt to save the relationship, she tried to confront him directly. Ethan, I know I was wronged, I know I hurt you, but I want to explain. It was nothing more than a conversation, she said with tears in her eyes. A conversation? Lily, is this what you call a conversation? You leave in the middle of the night to meet him and expect me to think it was nothing? Ethan asked, his anger evident. I don't know how to make you believe me, Lily said, her voice shaking. But you have to understand that I don't love him anymore. I love you. If you really loved me, you wouldn't have needed him, Ethan answered, leaving Lily in silence. The day ends on a dramatic note, with Ethan and Lily separated not only physically, but also emotionally. Lily's betrayal, even if it can be interpreted as a human error, created a deep rift in their relationship. The question that remains is whether this rift can be repaired, or whether it will become the beginning of the end for their story. Chapter 11. Silent Revenge. Ethan woke up the cold morning after his breakup with Lily with a feeling of emptiness he didn't know how to handle. Deep-rooted as their love had been, the betrayal he had felt had buried his hopes of a future with her. Instead of a direct confrontation or an attempt at reconciliation, Ethan chose a more subtle and quiet path, promised to rebuild his life, but without Lily. Lily instead was stuck between wanting to make things right and realizing that Ethan didn't. She was ready to listen. Every step she took towards him was interrupted by the distance he resolutely kept. Ethan decided to throw himself into a new life. Trying to put the whole story behind him, he began to explore places and activities he had previously ignored. He tried new sports, got involved in social events, and accepted invitations to parties he had always avoided. In these new circles, Ethan created a different image for himself, a man free, strong and independent, but beneath this controlled exterior, there was a smoldering anger and a deep pain. One of those parties, Ethan met Clara, an attractive and lively woman who immediately fascinated him. Clara was the opposite of Lily, direct, exuberant, and without any trace of mystery. For Ethan, the relationship with Clara was not a choice out of love, but an escape, a way to prove to himself and to those around him that his life was moving forward. But every time he was in Clara's company, Ethan could not ignore a constant thought, Lily. Although Clara had a unique charm, she could not fill the void left by the love that Ethan and Lily had shared. Still, he continued this superficial relationship. Convinced that time and distance would heal the wounds, Lily, meanwhile, fell into a rut marked by regrets. The betrayal she had committed had not only destroyed her relationship with Ethan, but also confronted her with her own insecurities and fears. She continued to search for him, sending him messages and trying to set up dates, but Ethan remained cold and distant. His constant refusals increased her guilt, but also gave her the motivation to become a better version of herself. Lily chose to focus on her artistic career, putting all her energy into her paintings. Through art, she found a way to express pain, hope and the desire for forgiveness. Her exhibitions had begun to attract critical attention, and her name became synonymous with authenticity and deep emotion. However, every professional success came with a price, the sense of personal emptiness that Ethan had left behind. Every time she saw something that reminded her of him, a book, a cafe, a song, she was transported to the past, to their happy moments. These memories motivated her to try again, to mend the burnt bridges. The confrontation between the past and present became inevitable one evening when Lily decided to attend a charity party organized in town. Little did she know that Ethan was going to be present, accompanied by Clara. When the two saw each other for the first time in months, the air between them filled with tension. Ethan avoided eye contact, pretending to be engrossed in his conversation with Clara. Lily, on the other hand, chose not to run away from this confrontation, close to him, ignoring the curious looks of the guests. "Ethan, can I talk to you?" she asked, her voice firm but whispered so that only he could hear. Ethan hesitated for a moment, but Clara cut in, smiling coldly. "I think he is busy." "Clara, hold your seat," Ethan said, surprisingly calmly. His gaze then turned to Lily. Good, but short. They went out onto the deserted terrace, where the cool night air was a welcome contrast to the tense atmosphere inside. "Ethan, I'm sorry, I know what I did was wrong, but please don't make me think that this is the end between us," Lily said. Her eyes filled with tears. Ethan remained silent, looking at Lily. "You destroyed something that I thought was indestructible. I don't know if I can keep it up." She shook her head. "Give me a chance to prove to you that it's worth trying again." "Why now? Why again?" "I'm not a spare, Lily," Ethan said in a hoarse voice. However, his look betrayed the fact that, no matter how hard he tried, he couldn't completely leave her behind. Chapter 12. Wealth as a Refuge. Lily woke up more and more often with an acute sense of emptiness. Every morning she found her staring absently at the coffee pot that filled her quiet kitchen. Her thoughts were always on Ethan, on his hurt look, on the moments when she wanted to tell him that he regretted everything. But an invisible wall seemed to have risen between them, a barrier made of silence, guilt and mistakes. His appearance, Adrian, her ex-boyfriend, was like a blinding light in that dense fog. Adrian was a rich, confident man, with an air of superiority that came naturally. When he offered her financial help, at a time when Lily was truly vulnerable, she didn't know how to refuse. Adrian's promise to help her restart her career as a pianist was exactly what Lily had been calling for since she was a teenager, a chance to reinvent. "You need stability, Lily," he told her one evening, when they had dinner in an exclusive restaurant in the city. "You can have everything you've ever wanted, you just need someone to believe in you." His words were a balm to her insecurities, but they came with a price. Adrian was asking her to start attending his events, social, to once again be the woman who perfectly complemented his public image. For Lily, this request was an acceptable compromise, a small price for a chance to rebuild her life. But while their fake smiles reflected in the mirrors of opulent balls, her soul continued to drift away from Ethan. Ethan, in turn, had noticed the change, even as he tried to sink into his new life. With each passing day, Lily seemed more inaccessible. A part of him she was crumbling. He had seen her twice in a society magazine, smiling next to Adrian. Her image, adorned with expensive jewels, was no longer the same woman that he had known. It was as if Lily had become an outsider, a glossy reflection of a world that excluded him. But the truth was more complicated. Lily did not feel at ease in a world of ostentatious wealth. Every designer dress and every piece of expensive jewelry clung to her skin like chains. Adrian treated her with calculated politeness, and his attention made her feel paradoxically enveloped and yet alone. Every moment she spent with him was the closing of another chapter of her authentic self. "Are you sure this is what you want?" an old friend had asked her, who had visited her on a quiet afternoon. "I don't know," Lily had answered, while running her fingers through a bouquet of expensive roses that Adrian had sent. But I need to find a way to move on to one of the luxurious events organized by Adrian. Lily had a moment of revelation. She was in a grand hall, surrounded by people discussing business, art and investments, but nothing seemed real. Her gaze fell on a huge mirror and, for a moment, she saw herself as she was, a woman living a life that did not belong to her. It was like a slap in the face. Adrian, she had told him later, in a moment of forced intimacy, I think I need time to think. I'm not sure if we mean what we think they mean. Lily, he replied, with a calmness that hid a tinge of frustration. It means that you forgot how much I did for you. Everything I did in the last year was for you. But if you need time, I will respect your wish. Although his words were seemingly generous, Lily felt a growing pressure. The time she shared with Adrian had already cost her too much. Ethan was no longer part of her world, and her old friends still seemed shocked of her chain. Even music was no longer a refuge. The piano, once a source of joy, had become a symbol of broken promises. Ethan, in parallel, had begun to find his balance. He had become involved in an artistic project that he allowed himself to channel his frustration. Every time he thought he had forgotten Lily, something, a scent, a song, a place, brought her back to life. But he knew that he could not continue living in the past. The artistic project, a series of paintings inspired by the cafe where they had met, had become his therapy. Whatever happened, Lily was an important chapter, he told a close friend. But now I have to write the next chapters. But one day, Lily appeared at the gallery where Ethan's work was exhibited. She looked different, without jewelry, dressed simply, but with that depth in her eyes that had once attracted him. Ethan was surprised. But he knew that the moment was important. Their eyes met, and time seemed to stop. I was wrong, she told him, slowly, almost in a whisper. But if you can listen to me, I would like to explain. Chapter 13. Ethan Reborn. After the difficult months that followed their breakup, Ethan immersed himself completely in the world of literature, using the accumulated pain and anger as an engine for his creation. The process was not an easy one at first. Every written word seemed like a titanic effort, every phrase a wound that refused to close, but gradually, the act of writing became a form of therapy. Each completed page was a victory against the past, a declaration of independence from the memories that haunted him. Ethan began by writing short stories, fictions that captured fragments of his own life, disguised as fictional characters. Soon, these stories attracted the attention of a small literary magazine. The publication of a first volume of stories propelled him into the spotlight to a larger publishing house, and success did not take long to appear. Audiences were drawn to the emotional honesty and complexity of his story, and Ethan quickly became a household name in the literary world. Fame and financial success did not come overnight, but were the result of constant and dedicated effort. Ethan attended events literary. He gave interviews and began to be invited to various television shows. Critics called him the voice of a wounded generation, and readers found themselves in his words, appreciating the way he approached universal themes such as loss, self-discovery, and hope. Meanwhile, his personal life remained deliberately simple. Ethan bought himself a modest apartment, tastefully decorated but without extravagance. The only things that reflected his success were his huge library and office. Solid wood, where he spent hours writing. Although he was surrounded by people who admired him, Ethan remained reserved and reluctant to open his heart again. A moment of the turning point in his career was the release of his first novel, Shadows in the Light, a semi-autobiographical story about love, betrayal, and rebirth. The book became an almost immediate bestseller, and critics praised Ethan's emotional depth and lyrical style. The success opened new doors for the novel and propelled him into a world of opportunities. He was invited to speak at prestigious universities and received offers for film adaptations of his works. Meanwhile, Lily lived an existence marked by contradictions. After accepting financial help from her ex-boyfriend, she became increasingly trapped in a lifestyle she never really wanted. Elegant dresses, worldly events, and luxurious things filled her time, but left an ever-deepening void in her soul. She mourned the loss of Ethan and discreetly followed him on social media, reading about his success and how it transformed her life. The moment Lily learned about Ethan's novel was a revelation. Reading the book, she recognized her own mistakes reflected in his words and realized that although the story was not completely autobiographical, many of the emotions described were clearly inspired by their relationship. The passages about betrayal and loss hit her with an unexpected force, and the description of the protagonist's rebirth inspired and crushed her at the same time. It was as if Ethan had managed to find meaning in the pain she had caused him. Motivated by what she had read, Lily decided to contact Ethan. But every time she started to compose a message, her thoughts, they were overwhelming her. What could she say to him? How could he fix something that seemed irreparably broken? However, something deep inside her was pushing her to try for Ethan. The news that Lily had read his book came as a surprise. She sent him a heartfelt letter, apologizing for the pain he had caused and congratulating him on his success. Ethan read the letter with a divided heart. Although he felt her sincere regret, the wound in his soul had not completely healed. However, something in the tone of the letter turned it into more than a simple attempt at reconciliation. It was an